For the longest time, the cannabis market has pretty much run on one simple rule. Higher THC means a better product. But what if that's not just a little off? What if it's completely backward? Let's get into it.
The researchers behind this study really hit the nail on the head. This whole obsession with THC, it isn't based on science. It's just a habit, a leftover from the illegal market where a high number was the only easy thing to measure. But now, as the legal market grows up, science is letting us ask a much, much better question.
Exactly. If that giant THC percentage on the label doesn't actually promise you a better experience, then what does? That is the big mystery these scientists set out to solve. Okay, so first, let's really unpack this potency illusion. Why is chasing those super high THC numbers not just a waste of your money, but maybe even a bad idea altogether?
This slide really lays out the problem perfectly. We're all paying more for higher THC, but the research shows that number has no real link to whether you'll actually enjoy it. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite. So what is the key? Well, a huge study pointed to something totally different: the product's smell, its aroma. And here's the big catch. How in the world do you scientifically study something as personal and subjective as smell? You can't just have a bunch of scientists sniffing something and going, yep, smells good. You need a real, standardized, repeatable way to talk about it. And that was the main goal of this whole project, to build the very first scientifically backed lexicon, basically a dictionary, for describing the smell of cannabis. A massive job, but you can see why it was so incredibly important. So how do you actually build a new language for scent? Well, the researchers had this brilliant three-step process. First, they just listened. They dug through thousands of descriptions from regular consumers. Then, they took that massive list and cleaned it up with the help of industry pros. And finally, they took the top 25 terms and tested them with a professionally trained sensory panel to make sure they were solid. And this is where it gets so cool and, frankly, so scientific. For every single word, they created a physical or chemical anchor. So earthy isn't just a vibe, it's the specific smell of a chemical called geosmin. Cakey, they literally used hydrated white cake mix as the standard. This is what makes it real science. Any other researcher anywhere in the world can now use these same standards and get the same results.
So the team has its new language and its trained panel. What happened when they let them loose on 91 different cannabis samples? Let's take a look at the patterns they found in all those different smells.
The results were pretty amazing. It turns out the smells weren't just random. They naturally grouped together into 4 main families. You had your sweet shop group, full of fruity, berry, and candy notes. Then there was the rustic den, with all those earthy, musty, and skunky smells. You also had a citrus and chemical group. And last but not least, a cheesy and savory category.
And they found another really interesting pattern when they started sorting things out. The high THC products, they were much more likely to fall into that skunky, earthy, rustic den category. Meanwhile, the low THC, high CBD products tended to smell citrusy, fruity, and sweet. And this probably just comes down to what breeders have been focusing on for all these years.
Okay, but get ready, because this is where the study drops its biggest bombshell. Seriously, it completely challenges one of the most basic beliefs in the entire modern cannabis industry. You've totally seen this if you've ever been in a legal dispensary. Products are marketed by their terpene profile, right? Those are the aromatic oils that are supposed to create the scent. And the logic seems simple. Look at the lab report, see the terpenes, and you'll know exactly what it smells like.
I mean, it just makes sense, doesn't it? The terpene D-limonene is famous for that bright, citrusy, lemony smell. So if a product is packed with D-limonene, it's gotta be a total citrus bomb, right?
Yeah, no, not even close. The data showed the complete opposite. They found a whole group of samples that had incredibly high levels of D-limonene, the citrus terpene, but the trained human panel gave them a low rating for actual citrus smell. It's wild. I mean, the study authors just lay it out there, plain and simple. The chemistry just didn't line up with what people were actually smelling. The one compound that was supposed to scream citrus, well, it didn't. So the huge takeaway here is this. Just looking at a simple terpene lab report is a terrible way to predict what something is actually going to smell like to you. The whole experience is clearly way more complex than just the sum of its chemical parts. Okay, so let's bring this all home. After all this amazing, groundbreaking science, what does this actually mean for you? When you're just trying to figure out what to get?
So let's recap, because we've busted some huge myths today. We learned that potency is not a good sign of quality, aroma is. We learned that a real scientific language for that aroma now exists. And most shockingly, that a lab report on terpenes can't reliably tell you what you're about to smell.
Honestly, the best analogy here is wine. Nobody, and I mean nobody, walks into a wine shop and asks for the bottle with the highest alcohol content. You talk about notes of oak or cherry or blackberry. This science is basically screaming that it's time we started talking about cannabis with that same kind of sensory intelligence. And check out this number because it is just staggering. The researchers analyzed over 40 different aromatic compounds, terpenes, sulfur compounds, the whole shebang. And even with all that data, they still couldn't build a chemical model that could predict what the human panel was smelling. It just goes to show you how powerful and complex our own senses are.
Which all leads to the single most important and, honestly, most empowering message from this entire study. The science has now proven that the most advanced piece of equipment for judging cannabis quality isn't some fancy lab machine, it's the nose right on your face. It's really that simple. If something smells good to you, this research strongly suggests you're far more likely to have a good experience with it, no matter what any of the numbers on the label say.
And that leaves us with the big question for the future. Now that the science is here and it's validating the power of the human nose, will the industry and all of us, consumers, follow? Are we finally going to move past the potency illusion and start to value the rich, complex, and deeply personal world of aroma? I guess only time will tell.